Welcome to the Venari podcast. My name's Tom Woods, and today, once again, we'll be talking about all things digital transformation. Today, I'll be speaking to Rhea. Rhea is an accomplished digital lead. She's formerly of eBay, Aviva, Paperchase, and currently an interim director at Monsoon Accessorize. Rhea, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for the invitation.
No problems at all. Thank you very much for accepting. And so wanted to start off by talking about digital and customer experience from a strategy perspective. So I wanted to find out what are the key strategies that you implement for digital transformation, and how can they be applied across different industries, and really interestingly as well for yourself, how is that different as a consultant or an interim versus as a permanent employee?
So I think taking the first one, I'm a fairly simple person, and I tend to think that the toolkit is the toolkit, right? Regardless of industry. I've been in financial services, I've been in hair care, I've been in media. The toolkit is the toolkit, and for me that is about starting with the customer and starting with data. And I think a lot of people will think about customer and think about it as something that kind of sits potentially in kind of an ops box, or not necessarily intrinsic to the strategy, or that you might have kind of a business strategy and a customer strategy. But my start point is it's one and the same. Delighting customers or correcting for their pain points is the thing that kind of drives the revenue. So my start point is always kind of that end-to-end audit of the data available, and then gap filling, and being really crisp about what customers want, what they need, and how that fits with your offer. So starting with the data is always super crucial for me in terms of building that roadmap out. And then I guess the second thing is really building confidence in the plan. So again, people tend to think at times of strategy as kind of having this, like it starts with a big S. It's not God. It's we're not a president. It's just it's a thing. It's a business planning tool that helps you achieve your goals. So for me, strategy is very much kind of a living, breathing thing, and that means you've got to kind of have a roadmap that's both fast and slow. Fast, delivering on things quickly and building confidence in the business and in the strategy, and long. So definitely a two-speed strategy, but firmly rooted in customer and data. And then I think, to answer your second question, I guess I go back to my first answer, which is the toolkit's the toolkit. And as an interim, the difference may be that you may be doing a role that's more about babysitting and holding the baby. You might be doing one that's more transformational. So I think establishing that up front with whoever the client is, the employer, but also kind of assessing what's there on the ground as well is really key. It's easy to overreach. My inclination will always be to turn up and kind of dust off the strategy and rework it, and that might not be the brief. So I guess, yeah, for me the approach will be the same, but the time period might be truncated, and also the scope of the work.
Yes, no, definitely. And I'm really interested there about the data. In terms of that, obviously you were key in terms of the insight at eBay. Where do you start with the data, especially when you are looking at, such a massive pool, or you're coming in where the strategy needs to be reset almost?
Most people would say start with what's there to see what you've got, and I wholeheartedly approve of that. I think what's really important though is also to be very honest about what's not there. There's an enormous belief in a lot of C-suites that we've got tons of data and there must be some magic in there. If only we could extract what we've got, then we'll crack it. Well, actually, yes and no. A lot of businesses have got a lot of online data. It's not necessarily going to give you everything that you need to write a strategy, and that's sometimes where the external data, market data, customer insight comes in. And of course, not everyone has brilliantly clean or warehouse data. So yeah, it's starting from what's there is a great approach, but also is augmenting quickly the gaps that are there.
Yes. And then moving on to kind of team building, and especially kind of post-COVID kind of hybrid working patterns. For you, what is key in terms of building a successful digital team, and how has that maybe changed or not changed in your opinion since we've kind of got this more hybrid approach, especially after COVID?
consider myself quite lucky in the sense that when you've worked for a huge global, and
Mm.
I was in a regional team, but had a huge amount of stakeholders globally in the States when I was at eBay, but also actually at Aviva. Aviva, whilst mostly UK based, is multi-sited. So, for 8 years of my time at eBay and Aviva, remote working was just normal. You got on conference calls, you might be speaking to someone in Switzerland, you might be speaking to someone in Norwich. So I guess I was pretty lucky in that big jolt didn't really happen to me, and I was used to working with people across markets and in different time zones. So I think I probably have a much rosier view of multi-sited working than a lot of clients.
Mm.
What I would say though is, if you can't make a team work at least semi-remotely, then that's probably an unproductive and low trust team. And so I guess for me, building that trust is really important. That's a
Mm.
non-negotiable. So that's about regular check-ins, it's about one-to-ones, but it is also though about making sure the team know each other,
Yeah.
and they can relate to each other, and that doesn't necessarily happen remotely. So I am a great fan of offsites, workshops, anything innovation related. It really has to be face to face. So yeah, I think it can absolutely be made to work, and I've loved working remotely with lots of different teams, but it does certainly require, I think, a bit more effort.
And when you are hiring, I guess you are quite conscious of that. Bring people in, it might take a little bit more effort or a bit more work. How do you make that assessment? Naturally, you'd still want to bring someone in, but the first 2 or 3 times you meet them is probably remotely. So how do you personally, I guess, ensure that you're getting the right fit for you?
It's a really interesting one, isn't it? And it's such an intangible. That's
Mm.
really difficult. I mean, I guess as a start point, if it's easy enough, if you're running a remote team, someone's got to have enough screen presence or comfort, to be able to have a normal conversation like this, as remotely as is needed, because that's always going to be a requirement of the job. That being said, no one's obviously ever themselves completely when they're on interviews. So I always like to give candidates a task, and that will at least show how they present, both kind of in written form and when they're naturally more kind of on show. So yeah, I always think a task is really important, certainly at a certain level.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, there's other ways. It's kind of we're mammals at the end of the day, and we're hardwired to want to read someone's body language and be around them and kind of but actually, there are other ways of assessing someone's interpersonal skills, how they
Mm.
interact by email, what they do with LinkedIn afterwards, their body language when they're speaking. So I think it's more important for leaders to attune to that when they're hiring, but also in the day job. I found, I think, as probably a lot of people did, that if you really kind of tune into your empathetic street, you can learn
Mm.
an awful lot about how someone's feeling, from how they carry themselves and their expressions. You don't necessarily need to be in the same room.
And sort of looking ahead and sort of coming to the end and wrapping up, when we look at the future of digital transformation and customer experience, what do you see as being the next big thing or the future?
Omnichannel isn't new, but
Mm.
it's still very far from cracked. And I think for businesses that hope to have a physical presence, a thriving physical presence in the next, 10 years, Omni is the answer to cracking that. And I'm actually seeing kind of omni-channel leader roles coming up
Mm.
now, and I think that can only be a positive thing. The days when there's kind of a retail director over there doing shops and a digital director over here doing doing the digital stuff is fantastic, but ultimately I think perhaps as the customer experience moves on and Omni becomes the norm rather than the exception, I could see those roles actually merging over time, almost more like an old school ops director. And then I guess on that front, I do see certainly that, as more and more experiences, both marketing and CS become digital, that the CMO and digital roles could end up merging. The chief customer officer and digital roles could merge, and that's only to the good. So I think there's a few things coming out of that kind of customer experience evolution that will have an impact on what leader roles do. And I think one of the things that I'm also seeing is the merging of the trade aspect of e-com in particular with that kind of strategy and digital marketing. And actually those leaders tend to come up from different tracks. So there's a gap, I think, and there's still a tendency to kind of think of CDOs as kind of, they do the IT and then they do a bit of digital stuff, and they're kind of nerds, and sort of the real trade goes on over here, how we make money. Those roles, I think, will come together. So it's certainly going to be interesting, I think, from a talent and development roadmap over the next few years. AI, look, open source AI isn't going to change the world for business professionals. If you're client A and I'm client B, we've all got the same source of data, right? If it's open source, no competitive advantage. For clients who have big proprietary data systems that are well warehoused, cared for, and easily accessible, that's going to be a game changer. But I think there are fewer of those clients right now than we think there are.
Yeah, that's the challenge, really, making sure the data is actually clean and in the right place before you use it. But that's all we've got time for. But thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks, Tom.